and you may find yourself in another part of the world. And you may find yourself behind the wheel of a large automobile. Listening to this on a Friday, it's Music Lyric Friday. Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. It's the Ukraine War Frontline update for the 15th of December 2023. 2023? Get the year right. Anyway, same as it ever was. Let's get to the front line. We'll go to the northeast sector access from Kupiansk to Svatova to Crimea. Here we have some gains for the Russians, as according to Andrew Perpetua on his mapping. If you don't know what the lines on my map mean, please pause the video and check out the key. He indicates that the Russians are indeed pushing north of Sinkivka and putting a lot of pressure on that town. It is being hammered left, right, and center. The Russians are definitely sizing up for some activity around here. A big push into Sinkivka, I would have thought, as they apply some pressure to the nearby Kupiansk, which is quite a major hub. It's an important place. The Russians, I think, if they get past this river, as it can be seen to go down here, I've said this before, this would be the area that the Ukrainians would be happy enough to be pushed back to, but anything beyond that becomes a really serious problem. So there's perhaps some area to play with. There's some higher ground for the Ukrainians behind here looking over this region. But we'll see what happens in that area. The Russians have made some gains there over the last few days, over the last week or so. As for the ISW, nothing to report in the northeastern axis that I need to share with you. Just a lot of activity taking place, but no territorial exchanges. As according to Suryat Maps, the pro-Russian mapper, there is some gains for the Russians in the Rozhdolivka area. Just going north there, see if that's... here it is. So the Russian army advanced towards the town of Rozhdolivka, taking control of a trench built by the Ukrainian army in the last few months, taking over some Ukrainian defenses there, as according to Suryat Maps. Rybar, the pro-Russian source, says of the Solidar direction around Bakhmut, Russian troops continue their offensive operation in the Solidar direction. The main efforts are aimed at breaking into the Ukrainian stronghold in the vicinity of Chasiv Yar. The Russian army forces managed to advance in the southeastern outskirts of Orokhovo-Vasilivka. Fighting for Kudlina Balka is taking place, expanding the zone of control from Dubovo-Vasilivka towards Hirovka, and also reach the eastern outskirts of Bodanivka. Okay, so they are talking now about the area just to the southwest of Solidar, really, across the road, and in this area, Dubovo-Vasilivka, Bodanivka, Hirovka, Orokhovo-Vasilivka. So they're pushing in this area to get towards Chasiv Yar and overcome the Ukrainian defensive fortifications built there on the way to Chasiv Yar, just here and beyond. The rebar continue. To the south, fighting is taking place over the bend of the Chasiv Yar highway from the direction of Kromova. After capturing the Bakhmut Shlyak car racing track, Russian forces began firing at Ukrainian positions to the west. Now, this is in the Kromova area here. So we have the bend of the road coming up round here, and they're talking about moving along in this direction. And they say that this car track here is now under control of the Russians, so that would be a significant gain for them, and that would give a buffer zone to this northern or northwestern part of the city here, where the Ukrainians have been able to get visuals over that area from this high ground that sits behind the city there, and that has been useful for the Ukrainians. But Rybar claiming that Russians are now in control of most of that land in that region. Rybar continue to the west of Bakhmut. The Kamatin unit, composed of former Wagner PMC fighters, is clearing the western outskirts of residential area towards Ivaniska. Over 2 days, they've managed to expand zone of control in the private sector, and that is to talk about this area here, going towards Ivanivska, where they have indeed taken a fair bit of land. However, there are quite a few bits of drone footage to suggest it came at quite a cost to them. And that's the nature of Wagner, I guess. Taking areas but losing huge amounts of personnel in so doing. After occupying a dominant height of 215.7 on the northwestern outskirts of Klishchiivka, the Russian forces are expanding their zone of control. From this height, the Russian armed forces are controlling the AFU's advanced routes and approaches to Klishchiivka. And that is, again, remember, this is all pro-Russian sources saying this, but the heights around Klishchiivka to the west of Klishchiivka are taken by the Russians. And this is basically talking about this trench network here, and you would imagine that Suriyat Maps and Rebar are working in concert with each other to derive these conclusions. But it's not to say it definitely hasn't happened, but just be warned, of course these are the most positive Russian voices saying this. A direct assault on Chasiv Yar, which is located at the height, is a difficult task. Mines, quarries, and several forests will act as natural defences there, and they won't be taken on the spot. Most likely, the Russian armed forces will encircle the fortification from the north and south. That's why the offensive is being conducted in the direction of Avdiivka. In other words, when you look at Chasiv Yar, it's more likely to be taken in a kind of pincer movement like that, rather than just marching straight through. There's quite a lot of natural defences there, as mentioned, heights and forests. I think even a bit of marshland in certain areas as well. So anyway, that's, I guess, to say that from a Russian point of view, things are going fairly well in Bakhmut. No talk of huge gains in the ISW in terms of what's going on in Bakhmut. Suriyat Maps then goes on to say here in the Avdiivka area we were talking about, kind of along that that bend in the road where we've seen talk of this dirt track there, that the Russian army are continuing advancing along the railway east of Avdiivka, so that's the railway there, and took control of more trenches adjacent to the road of Chasiv Yar, and that's in this area here. Although they don't have that dirt track under control of the Russians yet, it is in the grey zone. And here we have no reports saying Bakhmut and Klishchiivka. So the Russians have made advances towards a road leading into Klishchiivka from the north and occupied parts of it. The area holds a strategic height and fortifications and is therefore important. Klishchiivka itself remains under Ukrainian control. But as mentioned before, there's no point in holding Klishchiivka if you are surrounded on the heights behind it. Now, this is to say that in the Klishchiivka area, it's basically no reports is aligning themselves with Deep State, and that the main trench area is not yet under the control of the Russians, as according to Suriyat Map. So there is still that difference. Here's a trench area around here. There's still that difference between the two mappers, or at least between sort of pro-Russian mappers and pro-Ukrainian mappers regarding this area there. Anyway, coming down south from there towards Avdiivka, we come first of all to the area of the slag heaps, or the tailings or spoils heaps by Pivdeni, and next to Horlivka, the larger settlement of Horlivka here. And as Suriyat Maps claimed yesterday, and we see the reflection in the map here, the Russians have control back of the very tallest of these piles, although again that is coming from a pro-Russian source and that is not yet confirmed. There was a flag placed on top of that, a Ukrainian flag placed on top of that over the last week, and they had definitely taken control of that slag heap, but yeah, Russians are claiming they now have control back. So it's possibly changed hands. We'll have to wait to see. Right, coming on to Avdiivka, where the ISW has some more things to say there. As you can see, Andrew Perpetua has the Russians pushing along the railway line north out of Stepova and towards Novomykhailivka. That is the Novomykhailivka here and not the Novomykhailivka there, one must remember. And Suriyat Maps has some gains for the Russians in that same area, as well as to the south of Stepova as well. So yeah, and can I just say a massive thanks to JR who did the mapping today. He's a bit of a legend. So, what does the ISW say? The spokesperson for the Ukrainian brigade deployed in the Avdiivka direction suggested that Russian forces are conducting particularly heavy assaults in the area between Stepova and the railway line, and reported that Russian forces are struggling to remove the bodies of those killed in action from this area. So, we know the Russians are taking huge losses. We know that they are struggling to remove bodies. There's lots of evidence of dead bodies around. There have been Russian reports of the same as well. So that is some tough fighting. I presume between Stepova and the railway line, it probably is this area that they're talking about. And just to finish that off, Russian mill bloggers have claimed that Russian forces are gaining a foothold on the southeastern outskirts of Avdiivka, particularly along Kolosova Street, although ISW has not observed visual evidence of Russian forces operating on or near Kolosova Street. So just to tell you where that is as we come to the southeastern area and the industrial area here, the Promka area, I think it is. We've got this sort of quarry point there, and there's this road here, the Kolosova Street. So the claim, as you can see, Surat Maps has Russians in control of the southern part of that. ISW says there's no evidence of that. So that is another contested set of claims. I would always go, if you want the conservative but more likely accurate appraisal of what's going on, go along with Andrew Perpetua, that hasn't given that to Russian control yet. It's not to say it definitely isn't, but he's just a little bit more conservative and demands a high level of evidence. And then when we come to the other sources concerning Avdiivka, we have Surat Maps saying up in this Stepova area that the Russian army has advanced northwards along the railway. Moreover, troops took control of the flanks of Stepova, thus taking control over most of the village itself. And then Null Reports says of similar area, although not so much in the Stepova, but more along the railway line there. North of Stepova, Russians made slight advances along the railway tracks in the direction of Ocheretny. A mechanized attack near Stepova was repelled. Russians lost a fair amount of BMPs and MTLBs. So again, claim that there is a large amount of mechanized equipment still being lost in the Avdiivka area at the moment. And then we come to the south, so moving down past Pervomaysky towards Novelsky, in an area where we haven't seen too much activity recently, but some slight gains, not tweeted about, but Deep State Map and Surat Maps has some claims or some evidence, I would guess, of Russian advance in that area between Novelsky and Pisky. This Novelsky is really important still for keeping Pervomaysky contested, which is itself important for stopping the encirclement of Avdiivka. So all of these places have these knock-on effects. So possibly some gains for the Russians in that area. And then we come on down to Novomykhailivka and Marinka. So we've got Marinka here, and we've got Novomykhailivka down here, and there's quite a bit of activity in both of these places. Let's go first to Marinka, and we'll come on to the ISW. In fact, this Pobjeda one, I guess first. Russian sources additionally identified Pobjeda as the next Russian direction of advance. So again, Pobjeda is one of these knock-on places. If Pobjeda falls, then Marinka at large will fall. It'll be encircled properly, and then of course, it's about fighting over Avdiivka and going back further to Kharkov back here. And Kurakove, and other places, Alexandropil, and so on and so forth. These are more important towns for their own kind of value in terms of logistics and whatnot. But actually, Pobjedas are also really important for this road. And if that road is interdicted or taken control of, then Konstantinivka is rendered vulnerable, which in turn renders Vuhledar vulnerable, as the Russians will be able to attack it from the north. And that means that the Ukrainians will be unable to use HIMARS with their 84-kilometer range that they use at the moment to attack places in Mariupol. So it's really important that this road remains under the control of the Ukrainians, which is why Marinka is important, and by extension Pobjeda. As a result, of the importance of Pobjeda, this tiny little agricultural community there, or set of buildings. As a result, the Russians are putting a lot of pressure on that. So we can see that although this has walked back a little bit from Syriac maps, they are signifying today, and as Andrew perpetuates as well, that the Russians have made advances in this area. Both mappers generally agree in the area to the east of Pobjeda, and indeed further to the north as well, sort of northeast here, general agreement. So, yeah, bit of a challenge for the Ukrainians in holding on to Pobjeda, as Marinka is compromised further and further with each successive day. So both mappers indicating that the Russians have made some gains in that northern area where the Ukrainians are still holed up and still are defending. Let's go then to Syriac maps, and says that in that Marinka area by Pobjeda, the Russian army is continuing advancing south of Marinka towards Pobjeda. A front was corrected, and that's that correction I talked about yesterday. Very slow to make those corrections. I think it's about 2 months too late, really. But there you go. And then we come on to Novomykhailivka. So troubling for the Ukrainians around this area, and then troubling for Novomykhailivka. And this is, again, important in terms of being a buffer zone for Konstantinivka. If Konstantinivka is compromised, then this road is compromised. And again, Vuhledar is in trouble. And that will allow Russia to protect Mariupol a lot better. So the Russians would love to draw their front line across here. And that's why Novomykhailivka, the Ukrainians really need to hold on to that. Andrew Perpetuus talked about this being one of the main areas of Russian attack. This is one of their main objectives, though you might not have realised it given Bakhmut and Avdiivka. But actually, they've been fighting over Novomykhailivka for a long time, and they really would like to have it. Syriac maps indicates there are some gains, not so much to the southeast where we've seen most of the attacks recently, but directly to the east and a little bit to the northeast as well. If we come on to no reports, they say a reassessment of the actual situation. Geolocated footage showed Russian units on the outskirts of the settlement, meaning Russians have advanced from the original line of contact. So that is an admission that the mapping was wrong for them, for no reports in that area, and the Russians have made advances there. And that's Marinka, the advance to the north, saying that they have 95% of control over the town now. Here's the Novomykhailivka one, which is that the Russians have made significant advances at the outskirts of Novomykhailivka, reaching the first buildings of the town from two different axes. Now, yeah, these are all... Well, no, they aren't all. A lot of these are pro-Russian sources, but it seems that Andrew Perpetua, as you can see here, is in agreement with those advances. And if he doesn't agree at the time of the claims, then as you can see here, the agreement comes a little bit later. So I think it's likely that, although it's not always the case, it seems that Syriac Maps is broadly getting it right at the moment. The Russians are pushing in a lot of places on that eastern front. Trying to, the question I suppose that I have is, what's Russia's end game? Yeah, we know the end game is all this fanciful idea about demilitarizing, denazification, having a land bridge to Odessa and Transnistria, etc., etc., etc. Yeah, whatever. But realistically, what are they actually trying to do? What are the commanders on the ground trying to achieve at the moment? And do they have the forces to keep this pressure up for a long time? Are they seriously going to make a large swathes of land capitulate and come under their control? What is actually going on here? And I guess we'll find out sooner or later. I just don't know that Russia had the forces to commit to really large scale offensives that are going to take huge areas of the Donbass back take it under their control. And then when you come down to the south by Krinky, there's actually not a lot of information coming out there. No real information about the southern front line, the Zaporizhia direction. ISW obviously says a few bits and pieces. Geolocated footage posted on the 14th shows that Russian forces made marginal advances on the eastern outskirts of Novomykhailivka, as pointed out. Here There are claims from Russian mill bloggers that units of Russia's southern military district advanced up to 2.5 kilometers wide and 1 kilometer deep to the west and south of Robotyne. They pushed the Ukrainian forces out of a tactically significant position and advanced up to 700 meters near Verbove. However, the ISW has not observed any evidence of these claims. So if we go to look at Robotyne, the claims are that the Russians have made advances around Verbove, advances around really here, Kopani, Novomykhailivka. They often make those claims and always turn out to be true. I guess it's waiting to see what turns up there. No information from the ISW, particularly about Krinky. It's pretty quiet there, although it won't be quiet. Of course, it's not quiet. Lots of activity taking place right up and right down the entire front line. The Russians do have the momentum in a number of places and they are pressuring. The question is, how far can they take that pressure? Can they commit to something like a major counteroffensive? Can they do it now? And if they're not doing it now, are they building up to do their own counteroffensive in spring? Or they're building up to defend against a potential Ukrainian counteroffensive in spring? What are the Ukrainians planning on doing through the winter? It's all kind of laying out in front of us, but it's difficult to work out exactly what the Russians are intending. Let me know what you think. What do you think the Russians are trying to do, particularly on this eastern front line? Do you think they will actually do a major push for Sinkivka? What do we think is going on with Avdiivka? Are they going to continue pressuring there? Are they going to seriously try and challenge for Chasiv Yar, given how long it took for them to take Bakhmut? And what do you think their goals are in this southern area around Novomykhailivka and Marinka? Anyway, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. Take care, and I'll speak to you in the update extra video I'll be putting together shortly.